Hi, Chris Mason again with AtLarge Nutrition. Today I want to discuss, both the specific and generality. I want to discuss our product Opticen specifically as a post-workout shake, and then just the general rules or parameters of post-workout nutrition and why Opticen fits well into that. So let's start in the beginning. First off, Opticen is a combination of protein, and of course it's a blend of protein like all of our products, whey, casein, and egg, carbohydrates and fats, and then various vitamins and minerals. The macros, protein, carbohydrates, and fats being the primary drivers of its efficacy as a post-workout shake. Now, before I kind of really get into this, one thing I want to clarify: you don't need a protein shake post-workout. You can get what you need in terms of nutrition via food after training. However, there's a convenience factor that protein shakes or supplemental shakes impart, which to me is kind of indispensable. In other words, it makes it worthwhile. It's kind of a pain in the butt to bring a bunch of food with you to the gym, and a lot of times you don't necessarily feel like eating as soon as you're done training. It's just a lot simpler to mix up a shake and take that directly after training. Okay, now let's talk about post-workout nutrition in general. A couple of things a lot of people don't realize. Most people, pretty much everybody that's interested, going to be looking at our product, going to be on this website, will know that protein post-workout is a good idea. Most people will think whey protein only, which is a misnomer, and I'm not going to get too much into that, but whey is a protein that very quickly gets into the system. It spikes protein synthesis or creation of new protein to a significant degree. However, it does very little to blunt the breakdown of protein. And after you train, your body is both stimulating more protein synthesis, but also it's breaking more protein down. In fact, without nutrition, without consuming some nutrients, that breakdown exceeds the synthesis of new protein, and you're in a net catabolic state. Again, why we want to consume some nutrition, some nutritional substances after we train. Okay, so whey doesn't blunt catabolism at all. Casein, on the other hand, the other milk protein, does. It stimulates protein synthesis to a lesser degree than whey, but it promotes, but it blocks or blunts protein degradation to a much more significant degree, and that makes it the perfect combo. And you know, you look in nature, milk protein is both whey and casein. You know, nature gets it right most of the time. So, all right. Anyway, so most people know to consume protein after training, but a lot of people don't realize you want, and this is for resistance-trained athletes, you know, guys and gals, distance trainees, people who are distance runners, that sort of thing. They know about carbohydrates, but a lot of weight-trained athletes don't necessarily think that they need carbohydrates after training, and that's wrong. And there's several reasons, which I'm going to outline here in a second. So you want protein, you want carbs for sure. You do want some fats, which I'll get to in a moment also, which is why we have fats in Opticen. Okay, the reason you want to take both protein and carbohydrates do several things. One, or at least a couple of things. One, they replenish glycogen stores. Glycogen is stored glucose, stored carbohydrate essentially, and it fuels high-intensity contractions. And so when you train, obviously those are high-intensity contractions, and you're going to burn through some of that stored glycogen in your muscle cells. And you want to replenish that, as well as in the liver, by the way, but that's a separate issue. So that's number one. Number two, it stimulates insulin release. Why do you want an insulin? Everybody likes insulin. You want an insulin release in the post-workout environment for a couple of reasons. Number one, well, let's hold that thought for a second. I want to backtrack just real quick. After you train, if you forget consuming nutrients, directly after an intense training session, your muscle cells are volumized. You've probably heard that term relative to like creatine use. A volumized cell is essentially just an enlarged cell. Well, a volumized cell has a couple of interesting characteristics, a muscle cell, not the least of which is when it's volumized, the muscle cell is stimulated for greater protein synthesis. In other words, it's stimulated to produce new proteins. In addition, a volumized cell will also stimulate or create more glycogen synthesis. In other words, obviously with these substrates available, in other words, if you have glucose available and if you have amino acids available, why you need them after training, if they're available to those muscle cells are going to make maximal use, because they're volumized, of both. They're going to maximally stimulate protein synthesis, or I won't say maximally because we'll get to that in a second. They're going to, in a more greater fashion, stimulate protein synthesis and glycogen synthesis, which again is exactly what you want in a post-training environment. You want to get back to an anabolic state, and you want to replenish those glycogen stores. Now, so that's just the trained state. In other words, after you train, the muscle cell is volumized. Insulin, back to insulin now. When insulin levels are elevated, when insulin is there, so to speak, insulin will also, even a cell that's kind of what they call it, super maximally stimulated for protein synthesis, because it's volumized, then, well, not super, yeah, well, more than the norm, we'll call it, insulin will further promote protein synthesis. So in other words, you'll get an additive, an even greater effect. And insulin obviously will also further promote glycogen synthesis as well. So those you need carbs for the insulin reaction, and you want carbs for the available substrate, the glucose, to turn into glycogen. Protein, again, for obvious reasons. You need protein to help that cell, that muscle cell, those muscles start repairing themselves. You want to be able to take advantage of this enhanced protein synthesis. Whereas enhanced protein synthesis is rate limited by the availability of amino acids. You're only going to create as much protein as you've got available, so to speak. Amino acids, by the way, are the constituents of protein. They're what make up protein. So when you hear those terms, they're kind of one and the same. Okay, talked about fats very briefly a few minutes ago. The reason you want fats, this is not as, let's say, solid in the science of it, but it is still, there's studies. First off, there's studies that indicate that complete meals, and a complete meal, of course, contains fat, work better than either just carbohydrates or just protein, or even a combination of protein and carbohydrates. So there's the addition of fats, for whatever reason, creates a more anabolic state more quickly in the post-workout environment. Secondarily, you're also going to have the effect of fats in one's diet can help support testosterone. Obviously, for men especially, and women produces small amounts as well, testosterone is very important to the training response. More testosterone, for anyone that knows about steroids, enhances muscular size and strength. So you want to support your body's own production of testosterone, and fat in the diet can help with that. So there may be an effect there. You know, we're not going to call that rock solid, but it's certainly the anecdotal evidence, in other words, the empirical, in this study, the complete meal was better. So that's it. Now, Opticen, that's it for the general parameters. Opticen, our product, contains all of those. Very high quality, the best protein you're going to get, basically. A good quality carbohydrate, quickly absorbed carbohydrate, which is what you want. In other words, you want that substrate available for use, right? You want that glycogen replenishment. You want that insulin spike. Told you some fats, and then various vitamins and minerals. So it can actually also function as a meal replacement. But the primary focus, it was primarily developed in its most current state specifically for post-workout nutrition. So I hope this has helped. I kind of do the what do you want to say, the rambling videos here. In other words, not overly prepped. I like to just kind of do it in a conversational tone. If you have any questions, certainly this will be up on YouTube. You can post questions there, and I'll do my best to address them. Thanks for taking the time to watch this.